Hi everybody, here we are in Itzvah. It's Friday. It's a pretty cold day with snow here in the mountains. And I'd like to get right down to our Torah lesson in this special ambience of sitting out here and see how long I can handle this cold weather. But anyway, getting right down to our Torah lesson. This week's, of course, we're beginning Rosh Chodesh Adar. We have a beautiful month coming up with the holiday of Purim, and then Pesach is coming right away. On one hand, we see the snow here, but of course spring is in the air. We can feel it coming in. And all this, of course, represents a renewal coming. Right, the winter months, here we are in this cold weather. Everything is sort of in a stupor, and then everything's going to wake up to a beautiful, beautiful spring to begin to flower again. And this is the same thing when we work our divine efforts in trying to be close to Hashem and doing the right thing in this world are always coupled with different periods in our lives. Periods of dormancy when things seem to be a lot of inner work and sometimes not revealed, and all of a sudden a person flowers and he feels that beautiful renewal, and that things that a lot of the work he's done, sometimes you don't see it. You don't see the roots getting nourished and growing, and all of a sudden it bursts forth with a beautiful flowering and growth. That's very special, of course, very special about this world. God gives us different seasons, and everything is connected. The world, the physical world, is so connected to the spiritual world, and we have to see that. This week's portion, we focus on the building of the tabernacle. Right, everyone has to gather and donate. The most important thing, of course, is a person giving his heart and being part of something very special. Holy buildings, holy missions, and here the most holiest building in the world. Right, building the tabernacle. Eventually, of course, building our temple in Jerusalem. All this comes from a person's heart. Out of a person's heart, he's creating this beautiful structure where the divine presence will rest. And how Hashem wants us to be part of that very special thing. In this world, there are so many things a person can take part of. We have an opportunity of being part of building spiritual buildings. Those are the most important things in this world that one can do. And our great rabbis discuss in different ways the inner meanings of the temple, the way it was designed. We see there are three basic parts of the temple. One is the Holy of Holies, the most inner area where the ark stood, and only one time a year the high priest would enter that holy spot. And then we have the sanctuary, the Hechals, where the altar of incense, the golden altar, together with the table, and together with the menorah, the light, the candles were lit in the sanctuary. And then finally in the Ezrat Kohanim, in the outer area, the court area, which was still a very holy place, of course. That's where a altar was set up, called who's beeping their horn? Hi everybody, I'm back again here. I just entered my house. It was a bit too chilly out there, just to finish up this lesson. And we were talking again, what I was mentioning before about the tabernacle and the structure of the temple. This is, I read a beautiful essay by the Chalban who brings down some esoteric teachings that compare a person, a human being, the way we're built as human beings, to the actual temple itself. And we'll see how this is reflected. For example, we know as human beings, we have three major parts three major aspects or faculties. We have our thinking power, our brain power, our hearts, which deal with the emotions, and we have, of course, our desires, our animalistic parts about us. Which means, obviously, we're not animals. We have the ability to uplift ourselves and raise these particular animalistic, I call them, faculties within our beings and uplift them by worshiping Hashem. Those are the three major aspects of a person, which is divided into the 10 esoteric spheres, which we're all aware of, and we've spoken about them many times. And here we see in the temple, this was the exact outline of the temple itself. The temple had three major parts to it. The outer part was the Azara, Zat Kohanim, where we know that the external altar stood, and it was the most noisiest area of the temple. That's where all the sacrifices were brought. And here it's so clear that there mainly was offered was animal sacrifice, and that represents the animal within us. And we have to uplift and worship Hashem with that animal within us. And as we go further in deep, we go further to our hearts, and we enter the sanctuary. In the sanctuary, You have the golden, in the center, the golden altar. The golden altar where the incense was offered. Wow, with a very powerful, very special fragrance, which is much more spiritual. The candelabra, the menorah, which was located in the southern part of the sanctuary, and that represents light. We see the beautiful light, using again our sense of seeing, sense of smelling. And then, finally, on the northern part of in the sanctuary was a table with a showbread, which was again changed every week on Shabbat. So the atmosphere within the sanctuary was much more, getting more private, getting more intimate, quiet atmosphere, not all that noise of the sacrifice. And here we don't have any more, no more animals enter that realm. And here we only have plant life, the olive oil made out of olives, and the incense made out of course, plants, the incense on the altar, which was used, and of the bread, again, which is made out of grain, and all this was taken within a further. As we get higher up, we are leaving behind the animal parts and getting closer to the, again, in spiritual, getting closer to Hashem, and therefore we leave that behind, and now we can worship God more intimately, on an intimate level, and that is represented by entering the sanctuary. And as we go further in, we finally reach the Holy of Holies, and here it is the highest of the high. Here is where it represents, it's comparable not to the, I mentioned before, the outer part, the Ezra, represents the animal part within us. The sanctuary represents the heart, the emotions, getting again closer. And finally, we enter the Holy of Holies, that represents our brain, our thinking patterns, our thought process. But the highest of highs, that's where the soul's within the brain, and that's only the high priest entered once a year on Yom Kippur, the Holy of Holies. It was so intimate of an area, it was just very rarely was even entered by a human being. And that, of course, represents the highest spiritual level as we get closer and closer in the inner space and getting closer to Hashem. And this we can see is reflected, of course, all we spoke about is a pattern of one's life in this world. As we travel, as I mentioned before, the seasons we were outside with the snow, and we see how a person's whole life is he's starting from the roar, his roar instincts he has, just like an animal, and slowly building himself up and perfecting himself and trying to get closer and closer to Hashem as he enters the Holy of Holies. That represents, of course, our mission in life, to be close to Hashem and to reach that stage of perfection and spirituality, which is all reflected in the temple. So we see here, a lot of times looking what are all these details outlined in this week's portion, 1,001 details. But these details represent, again, spiritual concepts within our lives, within everything about surrounding us in this world. And therefore, as we study Torah, we always have to be aware that everything that took place on a physical sense, of course, has another parallel understanding on a spiritual sense. But anyway, with this idea, I hope that you have a wonderful Shabbat and read and study and learn Torah. There's nothing greater than Torah, of course, and we will meet again very soon. Love and miss you all. Shabbat shalom, b'sorot tovot. Let it be a warm Shabbat. Bye-bye.